Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're doing something a little different today. We're taking a deep dive into anarchist perspectives on technology.
And honestly, these ideas feel super relevant right now with all the anxieties around AI.
Right. It's kind of wild how these thinkers, most of them writing way before the internet, seem to predict some of the challenges we're facing today.
Yeah, it's like they were sending us warnings through time.
So we've got this stack of essays, excerpts, books, even some articles spanning decades, all wrestling with how technology impacts power, freedom, even what it means to be human.
And how we can stay human in a world that's increasingly technological.
Exactly. So one of the first things that really jumped out at me was Lewis Mumford's work.
Oh yeah, Mumford back in the 60s, he was already ringing alarm bells about what he called authoritarian techniques.
Authoritarian techniques. Okay, what's
For-
that all about?
Well, he saw this stark contrast between the tools of pre-industrial societies, very decentralized, human-centered.
Like handcrafted tools, things that empower the individual.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have the massive centralized systems of the industrial age.
Like a factory production line where you're just a cog in the machine.
Right. And Mumford argued that this shift towards authoritarian techniques actually eroded human autonomy.
So basically, he was saying that technology can be used to control people to take away their freedom.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to think about that in the context of AI. Are we seeing a similar dynamic at play today with algorithms, data collection systems that seem to be making decisions for us?
It's a really good question. And then we have John Zerzan, who takes this critique of technology even further.
Zerzan, oh, he's intense.
Right. He describes industrialism as a form of domestication. He even draws parallels to the Luddite rebellion's workers who destroyed machines they saw as threats.
Because they felt like the machines were taking their jobs, taking their power.
Exactly. And it makes you think about the debates we're having now about AI replacing jobs.
It's like we're witnessing a new chapter in this ongoing struggle between human agency and technological control.
Right. And this leads to another big idea that comes up a lot in these essays, the myth of technological neutrality.
Yeah, Jacques Ellul is really great on this. He argues that technology is never neutral.
Meaning it's not just a tool, it has an agenda.
Exactly. It always carries the biases and intentions of its creators, who are often, well, let's face it, not the most diverse group.
So those in power end up shaping technology to serve their own interests.
And that brings us to Ian Reineke's work on workplace surveillance systems like FADS used to monitor typists.
Whoa, talk about creepy.
Right. And this was way before AI, so it shows how technology has always been used to control and exploit workers.
It's like this hidden history of technology that we don't often talk about.
And it's important to remember because it's still happening today, maybe even more so with AI.
So when we talk about progress, we need to be really careful about who benefits and who gets left behind.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to another fascinating and kind of scary theme, the impact of information overload.
Oh yeah, this one, Abby Mauschowitz, argues that too much information can actually lead to a decrease in meaning and social cohesion.
Wait, so more information equals less meaning. How does that work?
He uses this great analogy. Information acts like mass. The more mass you have, the more inertia.
Meaning?
It's like all of that data is weighing us down, preventing us from actually doing anything.
Wow, that's deep. So we're drowning in information, but thirsting for meaning.
Exactly.
And Herbert Schiller takes this even further with his analysis of what he calls myth information.
Myth information. Love that term.
Right. He was basically saying that the computer age has been full of false promises.
And that technology often leads to a greater concentration of power.
In the hands of corporations and governments?
Yep. And that makes you think about social media, right? It's supposed to connect us, but does it really?
I mean, sometimes it feels like it just amplifies the loudest voices, even if they're spreading misinformation.
And have you ever felt just overwhelmed by the sheer amount of information out there? Like it's harder to connect with the world, harder to find meaning.
Oh, totally. It's like this constant barrage of noise.
Right. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about technology's impact on our personal lives, our relationships.
Okay.
Greg Easterbrook dives into the addictive nature of computer games and how they can isolate us.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that happen. People getting lost in those virtual worlds.
It's like they're trading real-life experiences for digital simulations.
And Craig Broad takes this idea even further, describing something called technostress.
Technostress.
Yeah, the psychological toll of constantly adapting to new technologies.
Oh, I feel that. Like just trying to keep up with all the updates and new gadgets.
Right. And Broad actually highlights the stress experienced by data entry workers always under pressure to keep up with the machines.
Which is kind of a metaphor for all of us in the digital age.
Like we're all data entry workers in a way, constantly trying to process this flood of information.
And then we have Robert Sardello, who critiques how technology is influencing education, specifically teaching kids to code.
Hold on, isn't coding supposed to be like the essential skill for the future?
Sardello isn't saying it's bad, but he uses this powerful analogy comparing the programmed learning of grammar to the emotional detachment of a psychopath.
Whoa, okay, that's intense. He's basically saying that over-reliance on technology could make us less human.
That's the core of his argument, and it's a really important one to consider as AI becomes more integrated into our lives.
It's like we're standing at this crossroads facing a choice about what kind of future we want to create. Do we want to be masters of technology or slaves to it?
That's the question we'll continue to explore in the next part of our deep dive. So before the break, we were getting into some pretty heavy stuff.
Right, like the idea that technology could actually be dehumanizing us.
Exactly, and that leads to the question, are there any alternatives, or are we all just doomed to become robots?
Yeah, that's what I want to know. Give us some hope.
Well, some of these thinkers propose some pretty radical solutions, like Sally Gearhart. She actually advocates for ending technology altogether.
Whoa, like going completely off the grid. No more internet, no more smartphones, no more of this podcast.
It's a pretty extreme idea, but she believes that we need to reconnect with nature, prioritize a sustainable way of life free from the domination of technology.
Okay, I can see the appeal of that, but is that even realistic in today's world?
That's a good question, and Russell Memes, an indigenous activist, offers a different perspective.
Okay, well, let's hear it.
He critiques European culture's inherent drive towards domination and the destructive impact of industrialization on indigenous peoples and the environment.
So it's not just about technology itself, but the values and power structures behind it.
Exactly. Means argues that we need to challenge those underlying systems of oppression if we want a truly just and sustainable future.
It's like we can't just tinker with the tools we have to address the root causes.
Right, and speaking of root causes, T. Fulano has this really striking analogy.
Oh, yeah.
He compares civilization to a collapsing jetliner with technology as the driving force behind the inevitable crash.
Yikes. That's a pretty bleak outlook. So, are we all just doomed?
Not necessarily. I think these anarchist perspectives are valuable because they challenge our assumptions. They make us think critically about technology's role in our lives.
So they're not necessarily giving us all the answers, but they're asking the right questions.
Exactly. They're urging us to question the status quo, to imagine alternatives.
It's like a call to action to create a different kind of future.
Right. A future where technology serves humanity, not the other way around.
So what can we learn from all of this, especially now as we're entering this new age of AI?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Maybe it's helpful to recap the major themes we've explored so far: the historical roots of technological control, the illusion of neutrality, the impact of information overload, and technology's effects on the human experience.
Right, and it's all interconnected. Technology shapes society. Society shapes technology. It's this ongoing feedback loop.
Precisely. And in the context of the AI revolution, these anarchist perspectives offer a critical lens for understanding the potential pitfalls and opportunities.
So how do we apply these insights? Give us some takeaways for navigating this brave new world of AI.
Well, first and foremost, we need to be aware of the potential for AI to be used for control and exploitation we've seen throughout history, how technology has been used to reinforce existing power structures, to monitor and manipulate people.
So we need to be vigilant, make sure that AI is developed and used ethically.
Absolutely. And we need to resist the temptation to view AI as a neutral force. It's a product of our values, our biases, our intentions.
If we want AI to serve humanity, we have to be really intentional about how we design it.
Exactly. And another crucial point is the need for critical thinking skills in this age of information overload. It's more important than ever to be able to sift through the noise, to discern fact from fiction, to question assumptions, to think for ourselves.
So we need to develop a kind of AI literacy to understand how it works, how it can be used, and what its limitations are.
Exactly. And finally, we need to remember that technology is only part of the equation. We need to find ways to balance our technological advancements with the needs of our human spirit, our relationships, our connection to the natural world.
It's about finding a way to be both tech-savvy and soul-savvy.
Right, to integrate technology into our lives in a way that enhances our humanity, not diminishes it.
And that brings us to a really interesting idea from Morris Berman. He talks about the need for a re-enchantment of the world.
Ah, yes, Berman. He's a fascinating thinker.
So what does he mean by re-enchantment? It sounds kind of mystical.
He's talking about reclaiming our agency, cultivating a more holistic understanding of our interconnectedness with nature, and using technology in ways that promote human flourishing and a sustainable future.
So it's not about rejecting technology altogether, but finding a way to use it in a more mindful and intentional way.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that technology is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill. It's up to us to decide how we want to use it.
So we've been talking about this re-enchantment thing, but what does that actually look like? How do we use technology for good
hmm
in this age of AI?
Well, I think Berman's pointing to a shift in how we think, recognizing that we're not separate from nature.
We're all connected, yeah.
Right, and that technology used the right way can actually help us deepen that connection.
So it's not about ditching tech, but using it more mindfully.
Exactly. Think about how indigenous cultures have used technology not to control nature, but to live in harmony with it.
Hmm. That's interesting, seeing tech as an extension of their relationship with the earth.
Right. It's a different way of seeing things.
So we need to rediscover that reverence for nature. But how do we do that in a world obsessed with profit?
That's the challenge, isn't it? But I think these anarchist thinkers give us some guidance. Remember Mumford's idea of democratic techniques?
Yeah, technologies that empower people, not just those in power.
Right, and Alou's point about technology not being neutral is huge here. We need to watch out for biases in AI work to make tech more fair and inclusive.
And we can't forget about the human cost of all this progress.
Exactly. Thinking about technostress, the impact on education, we need to prioritize well-being, not just making things faster and cheaper.
Put humanity back at the center, but it all feels so huge. What can we as individuals actually do?
It starts with simple things. Cultivating that sense of wonder, spending time in nature, disconnecting from technology, reconnecting with yourself in your community.
Yeah, just remembering what it means to be human.
Right, and be more conscious about the tech we use, supporting companies, doing good work, demanding transparency from the big guys.
Using our voices and our wallets to shape the future, huh?
Exactly. And stay curious. Keep questioning. Keep pushing for a better world.
It's a fight worth fighting.
Absolutely. The future's not set in stone. We have the power to shape it, but we need to work together, challenge the way things are, imagine new possibilities.
That's a message I can get behind. So what do you say, listeners? Are you ready for the re-enchantment? Let's talk about it in the comments. Share your ideas for a more human-centered future.
And hit that like button, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future deep dives. Thanks for joining us.
Until next time, keep diving deep.